Hello, today is Tuesday, March 13th, 2018, and this is the weekly meeting for Kubernetes Sig Docs. Let's start by saying hello to new people. So, hello, new person.
Hi. I don't know if you can hear me or not. This is my first time using this wonderful device. My name is Tom. I'm just joining the Kubernetes Docs team here with Jared and Ryan and Steve and the others. It's nice to meet you all. I'm going to be a fly on the wall and eventually ask a lot of questions that will demonstrate just how much of a village idiot I really am.
Nah, all good, man. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome. All right. Let's see. I see no Jennifer, so let us defer an update on 1.10, unless Joe, you feel like you really want to give a stab to 1.10? No. Okay.
No knowledge. I have no knowledge.
Okay. I'm gonna just take your name off of here while we're at it. I don't know why you were on this.
It's Ami's fault.
Just a heads up, Jennifer pinged me and said she's running late due to a release at Heptia. So,
gotcha. Okay. Well,
all good.
We will keep 1.10 for the end. All right. Steve, do you want to talk about the spell checking PR?
Just briefly, and then let's also come back to that when Jennifer's here. But what I hadn't realized about the spell checker is that it's not a general purpose spell checker. It just uses a word list of known typos. And so I don't really think it's the appropriate tool for English text. And Jennifer chimed in the PR with the same view. So let's just call that good for now, and then let's hear from Jennifer when she arrives.
Okay. Let's see. Release note copy. Let's defer that for Jennifer as well. Let's see. Ben Hall, I think, is not going to join us, but I talked to him yesterday about the future of Kubernetes Bootcamp. Apparently, Ben has been out with a really bad case of the flu, but I spoke with him and he says that the plan is to update Bootcamp via HTML or a JavaScript tag instead of any GitHub-based approach. He's ready to start. He says that he should have it tested and a PR ready for next week. There's a related issue link in the agenda. If you are interested, look at that and talk to Ben Hall. Moving on, I would like to nominate Brad Topol for Sig Docs maintainer. Basically, he has already been doing the job. It would be nice to give him actual maintainer power and not just the cobbled together write access that we have given him right now. So let's big thumbs up for Brad Topol. I will open a PR and give him maintainer access and flag that for review. Right. New team. So I put together a new GitHub team for Kubernetes blog maintainers. If folks should see some activity around new folks getting added to that team, that is going to be Sarah Conway, Caitlin Bernard, Nate Karchner, Bob Hrdinsky, basically the folks who have always been maintaining the Kubernetes blog. We're just bringing them into the Kubernetes website to GitHub workflow and getting them off of Blogger as a platform. That migration process is getting near the end. So if you notice a new team, that's what's going on. Those are the people already involved in it. And I mentioned it because it's remarkable, but otherwise unremarkable. Yes, Joe?
I just want to ask if there was anything that T-Hood or anybody else needed for PRs. Most of them are still marked work in progress, and I'm happy to give help, but I didn't know what to do or how to support in that case.
Thank you. That's very kind. For Tahoot's blog migration, I think that is the only thing, like the little tiny piece that's left on that one is stripping special characters out of file titles just for good hygiene purposes. The other pieces, the other two open PRs that we have for blog migration related stuff are the owners and the blog guidelines. I'd like to sit on the owners until, well, okay, so the one piece that's missing right now, I really don't want to pick on her, but it's down to one person actually like going through the motions of becoming a Kubernetes org member. As soon as that is done, we should be ready to move. I have one fiddly migration piece for putting redirects on bloggers to avoid tanking the blog's SEO when we actually cut over the site. But yeah, right now there's nothing holding them up technically. It's just waiting for the big waving flag to say go ahead. But thank you very much for offering help. Let's see. All right, migrating the website from Jekyll to Hugo. So after a whole lot of discussion, we are going to proceed. In terms of timing for that migration from Jekyll to Hugo, we're looking at starting migration with a contractor the first week of April. That is 1.10 is scheduled for release on March 23rd. Starting the first week of April gives us a buffer for any slippage, any last minute fixes that need to happen. So we're looking at getting started then. The contractor that we've chosen is Bjorn Erik Pedersen, who at this point has contributed like 80% of the code base to Hugo. So hopefully the goal of this migration process is that it should be happening, but more or less invisible. The migration work itself should be totally invisible to contributors and users. And in terms of changing our own workflow, hopefully there's a very minimal, if any, impact at all. Hopefully that's just largely invisible. Hello, Jennifer, welcome.
Thanks, Zach. I was about to put something in the chat because lately I've been in meetings so big nobody can tell when late stragglers show up.
Well,
why don't I chime in on Hugo and we'll wrap that up and then head it over to Jennifer to the 1.10 topic.
Sounds good.
So the thing about Hugo is that Zach, you, I, Jennifer, Joe, we should sit down and meet with Bjorn, hammer out a schedule, sort of nail down the details. I'm going to assume we'll need to do a sort of docs freeze for the first week when we do the migration. Maybe for like we should put in some time for how long we're going to need to freeze the content and make sure everything works before we roll it out. So, and then communicating that to the rest of the community. And Eeyore seems on board with what we do. So I think we just need to come up with a schedule, announce it to everybody, be prolific about who we tell, and then just get this started. So should I set up the follow-up meeting with Bjorn to nail this all down?
Thank you. Yes, please.
Cool. On it.
Okay. There was something that came to mind when you were talking, but it didn't land, so I'm not going to worry about it. All right. Let's go back in the agenda a little bit. And Jennifer, we are so glad you're here because there are so many things that we'd love to hear from you about.
Well, yes, here I go, adding things to the agenda and then not showing up.
Well, here you are. You've shown up. It's lovely to have you.
Container and Kubernetes pod and
all right.
charts that we have.
So there's currently some background noise if you are not. Perfect. John, thank you. Jennifer, you want to talk to us first about 1.10?
1.10 is looking good, docs PRs wise anyway. I've asked for some help with a straggler that came in overnight that's currently looking to merge with master, but it looks like it actually belongs in 1.10. It's small. It's like I look at things like that, and if I know I can handle a manual fix, we're good to go. The other two are waiting because I'm being punctilious about tech review, but I would be willing to merge them now if need be. So, I mean, they've already gone through rounds of tech review, and the last bits of things look like bike shedding. So, and I let Steve know already, because of course, right now is when all of the projects at Heptio are landing in my lap also. And I can't seem to keep the stragglers from trickling in there too. So it looks like I will probably need help with the generated docs, much to my sorrow, because that's the part of this release I was looking forward to the most. But hey, another time.
Awesome. So have you already reached out to Steve?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other help that we can give you towards getting 1.10 ready to go?
I think things are okay. I'm trying to schedule next week pretty carefully because we've got a Heptio on site, of course. But I should be completely clear on Monday. And I've let folks know I'm not available for socializing Tuesday night. Maybe I should circle around with you, Zach, just because you did 1.9, to make sure that I have the list of what needs to happen day of really clear so that I can make sure I've got time set aside for that. Otherwise, I might need to ask for help day of, I'm afraid.
Okay. My experience was that I definitely needed help on day of 1.9, and I'm happy to pay that forward.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, but yeah, we can meet offline and sync up about scheduling. Okay, next, Jennifer. What's your take on the spell checking PR?
Well, I didn't actually take a look at it very carefully the first time around, but Steve went in and did a nice test, which I think was really the critical thing that needed to happen. And then asked me to take a look, and I did some more digging. And so I wanted to, I mean, people can go see, I wrote an extensive comment in the pull request, so you can see what I'm recommending. But I'll just say here to this group who may not all have looked at the PR yet or be aware of the issues, there are already excellent spell checkers out there you can integrate into your code editor locally. They work beautifully, far better than, I tested the one that I had already configured. But the Visual Studio Code one and the Atom one are both based on the same dictionary. So you're unlikely to get significantly different results from what I tested. And that is, spell check as you go. It's what we're used to in Word or Google Doc or whatever. There may be some confusion about how to use these spell checkers. I think we could certainly use some documentation in the how to contribute to docs, encouraging people to use spell checkers. But I think that misspell is really a tool meant to solve a different kind of problem in a different kind of environment. And so, yes, the intent was good, and it made sense, I suppose, out of the gate to think in terms of extending it from the Kate's repo and the community repo, but in the docs context, it's simply not an adequate tool, nor does it really, I think, represent the kind of workflow that we currently use. That said, I did also add a separate comment about a related but not identical issue, which is that in addition to spell checking, there are prose linters out there that we might want to think about integrating into workflow down the road. This is the kind of thing we need a working group and a proper proposal and some more investigation into. And I also made the point that I think we have, the kinds of culture shifts that we're already working on putting in place. We need those things in place first before we go mucking about with tooling at all. We need to encourage people to understand the style guide better, to understand what spell checking means and how they can do it easily locally. We need a whole lot of, sort of broader based community awareness. I think that looking at this tooling, starting to think about doing it now, maybe talking about it at the Doc Summit is a good idea, but only with an eye to helping us figure out what we can do now and what we should do next and where we want to get to eventually, where eventually is still not assigned.
Agreed. I feel like we have enough going on with our stack right now,
Yep.
and enough culturally without taking on a prose linter for funsies.
Right, or a spell checker that's integrated in any way, shape, or form and doesn't do the job
Sure.
sufficiently.
Okay.
So Jennifer, am I right in thinking, I think this is what you said, that this was designed for going through code files that have comments in them, is that right?
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, and so that's why they use a fixed list of known typos, because you can't go through a code file and have your spell checker pick up every variable name that's in code. So it might make sense to restrict your spell checking to a known list of typos in a code file, but it doesn't seem like it's the appropriate thing for regular English text like we have.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, just sort of out of idle curiosity, if you've got the same typo occurring regularly enough that you need a linter for it, it kind of points to like the same person entering the same typos, and why not just have them install that environment locally?
Yeah, it's a little, well, it looks to me from the discussion about vendoring with the misspell checker in the original code repo, it looks like it was meant to be integrated into local building, right? So you've got your spelling errors, either breaking your build or at least spitting out warnings. I didn't think that far, right? It's true that you don't have to build locally to check code in, but you are encouraged to do so. So, it's also a tool that looks as though it's meant more for that kind of integration.
Sure.
And again, the reason, as Steve says, you want to get rid of false positives. It's also small and lightweight. You don't want it slowing down your build process. So it addresses a whole set of important use cases. They just happen not to be ours.
Fair enough. Okay. Yes, Joe.
I think we ought to try to do our best to commend this guy's initiative and intent, while politely saying, it's not the right tool for the job, and we really want to set up something that can work for a developer or someone doing the actual doc submission as we go forward. I just want to be sensitive to the fact that because most of the team that's been kind of doing the initiation of this work is in China, there's no way that we're going to be up for a 2 a.m. meeting to join us in a scenario like this to understand the full context of it.
No,
and maybe this video will help, but
absolutely agreed. And that's one of the reasons I've tried to be careful about saying, look, misspell looks like a fine tool for the right context. But and I think that this is also another sign of just where we're still in this sort of cultural shift improving communication mode, where in all kinds of ways, the docs repository does not work like the code repository. And people keep tripping over that. And the more we understand where the disconnects are, the better we can try to explain why they happen, and sort of sympathize with them. When I'm complaining about, I'm trying not to complain about people submitting PRs against the wrong docs branch. It's confusing if you're used to just always working from master, in the code repo. So it's not a problem. It's not a problem exactly. It's a communication opportunity.
That is a really good point about contributor initiative. Yes, yes, we're going to say no to this particular PR, but this contributor undertook a lot of effort to create a solution that, if approved, would have required very little actual work to implement from the community at large, and that was a very thoughtful display of empathy on the contributors' behalf. So I agree, Jennifer, that we should be effusive in praise, even as we're clear in our rejection.
Well, and we do want to do something with it. It's okay, we don't want to recommend this particular tool, but we've agreed, I think we do want to encourage people to use spell checkers and to point out that they do exist. And,
Sure. If I recall, have we not added, I seem to recall a PR talking about encouraging people to use spell checkers in their local environment. And I had thought that was put through and approved.
I might have missed it and not checked.
I may be living in a fantasy.
I don't know of that either. I mean, this PR that we're talking about uses those words, encourage spell checking, but I haven't seen another one.
Okay. Well,
doesn't mean it's not there. I just don't remember seeing it.
maybe I just really dreamed so hard about it that it seemed true to me.
It was a good dream.
But let's make sure that it's reality and not.
Yeah.
If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Okay. Let me just add a note here. Make sure note about local spell checker. It's added to contrib guidelines. Okay. So one more thing from you, Jennifer, for reviewing release note copy. It looks like you are suggesting that we rotate reviewers from Sig Docs throughout the release cycle. So basically that we, go ahead and share your thoughts, please, on release note copy.
I think that I'd like to defer this one because Nick isn't on the call because he's still in the release meeting. And I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it. How valuable this suggestion even is based in part on some assumptions I need to confirm with him. And I also feel like I don't want him to feel like a rug's getting pulled out from under him because he's been doing a magnificent job trying to improve the release note process for 1.10 under very constrained circumstances. So my thoughts really, I mean, it came out of a conversation with Andrew and Steve last week about release notes generally. And so I think they need, sort of Nick and the 1.10 work for some more context.
Okay.
That might mean deferring for 2 weeks, depends on the state of the release next week. But I will take an action item to talk about it with Nick when he surfaces.
So I haven't had a lot of visibility into the release notes process for 1.10. And I'm curious, when you say constrained circumstances, would this be better for offline?
Not necessarily. From what I see, Nick and his shadow, Noah, I keep wanting to call them Nick and Nora, Nick and Noah have gotten more release note labels added to the Kate's repository so that pull requests and issues that actually require a release note ones, a user-facing, here's a user-facing feature or bug fix thing you really need to know about, so that those are better flagged and can be better sorted so that we can use that as a start for automating a bit better. But the big bulk of the work still comes after the automation tool dumps all of this often semi-intelligible content into some other file, markdown file, Google Doc. And so, the thought that, Steve and Andrew and I were brainstorming, and the thought that we had was that if we could start training developers in writing better release notes, that would be a piece of help here. And that another thing we might do is be part of the pull request process for upstream code, so that we catch infelicitous PRs or improperly tagged PRs early in the cycle. This is clearly not something anybody in Sig Docs can take on much. That's a lot of work, hence the proposal to rotate. So that's the summary, but I think Nick really needs to be part of this. And,
okay.
And yeah.
Thank you. It's interesting to consider. Yeah, let's.
I can see downsides. It was, but I also, there's this bigger context, surely we can make some efforts in the direction of improving release note copy earlier in the cycle. What might those be? That's the big question.
Sure, and that's been what the big slam for 1.8 and 1.9 as well, was the like all of the release notes all of the time at the end.
Right. Which was at least an improvement, as I understand it, over previous releases, wherein the poor release manager was stuck with making sense out of great
geez.
tangled mess.
Yeah,
And
the haunted look in J. Singer
there
DeMars's
was
eyes.
nobody trained in, sort of translating geek into English, formally on there. I mean, not that, I mean, like Jace is an amazing writer, but, that just, well, there's still this perception that the release notes are unduly burdensome. Honestly, I didn't experience it that way for either 1.8 or 1.9. Crazy making, but the end of the release cycle is always crazy making. That's just how releases work. So that, which is not to say that there's not room for improvement, because there certainly is. So, this is really, I think, an attempt to build on efforts people have been making bit by bit with every release.
Okay. Well, we'll defer more discussion until Nick is ready to join and talk about the release notes process. Whether that's 1 week or 2, we'll see. Okay, so moving on, rotations for the PR queue. Brad, thank you very much for wrangling PRs last week.
Sure, it was fun. Thank you.
Excellent. Steve, you are our PR wrangler for this week. Thank you very much in advance. If you are looking at this list of PR wranglers and you are interested in wrangling PRs for the good of the SIG, consider tacking your name to the list. And if you are new, we can talk about what PR wrangling involves, but Joe Heck has already written up an excellent guide to PR wrangling and the honors and duties incumbent thereupon. So yeah, give some consideration to taking a rotation for PR wrangling. Okay, I'm gonna jump ahead and talk about Twitter handles for CubeDocs. So Brad, I talked with the CNCF and the Linux Foundation about Twitter accounts for individual Kate's SIGs. There's no policy against it, and they're like, well, there's no policy against it, and I can't think why we wouldn't do it. So do it. So let's have a conversation about getting a Kate Sig Docs Twitter account.
Perfect.
There should probably be some discussion about who owns that and who maintains it and who posts when and best practices for that. But that's a conversation that we can have offline with anybody who's interested in joining that.
That to me sounds like the trickiest part is, okay, now whose email? We've got like a group email or something, because you don't want it to be your email, you don't want it to be my email. And then, I've seen how this works, where basically we share the accounts, and whoever has it, can feel free to post, which is nice. Any of the, say, the maintainers or what have you. So, yeah, we can take it offline and figure it out.
Okay. If you are interested in joining the discussion about Twitter for Sig Docs, please add a note to the agenda with your name on it, and make sure to include you in any meeting invite that gets sent out. All right. Oh, 1 second, sorry. Okay, so let's talk about moving documentation away from, or moving our doc set away from hosting OS and platform-specific documentation, and providing links to provider-specific or platform-specific documentation instead. I talked about this with my boss, Chris Anisic, at the CNCF, and he was very much in favor. So I think we have the blessing of CNCF in moving away from hosting provider-specific content in our doc set. And this is something that we talked about last week and the week before. And as folks were encountering provider-specific documentation, I know that like folks were chiming in and saying, like, Brad, I'm thinking specifically about your comment that it feels really good to let go of this. So is there anybody who thinks that we are taking the wrong tack by moving away from hosting provider and or platform specific documentation and providing links instead? No?
Is Andrew here? He was here for a while, right? Maybe not today.
I have not seen him today.
Yeah, he's got a flicking meeting too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he would be the one to, to advocate for maybe keeping some sort of presence in our table of contents. I talked to him about this the other day, and his feeling was he just, he places a pretty high value on not asking people to jump around from one doc set to the other. And he just wishes that in a perfect world, there could be some sort of automation that would let these things be, written by people outside this group, but automatically brought into our table of contents. So I'm not saying that that's my view. I just pass along that's the discussion I had the other day with Andrew.
Well, for us, that's July.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
I think that we can address the presence in the table of contents piece by having links by, specifically the on the CNCF side, the request has been to give some priority to Kubernetes certified service partners and Kubernetes certified platforms and distributions. And so I think we can address Andrew's presence concern just by providing links to service partners or certified service partners. But in terms of automatically populating documentation, that comes down to importing and mirroring content hosted elsewhere. I feel like that touches our stack in a way that doesn't necessarily provide a whole lot of benefit for the return of labor. I don't know. It's I look at the problems that we solve by moving away from hosted documentation, and I don't see a clear trade-off in trying to mirror hosted content on the site.
Yeah, I think there's a cost to actually trying to source that content. It seems like, yeah, you're saying the same thing. Yeah, exactly. Totally agree with you, Joe. Yeah, I would rather have clearly delineated boundaries of what goes into Kubernetes.io and then link out. And I say we try this, and then if we get user feedback that's like, oh my God, the onboarding experience is terrible because I don't know which external provider to accept, then great, we'll revisit it and redo the content. But I'm going to guess we will not get that feedback. So, but I think we should make the change and then get the data to back it up. Because right now the data seems to indicate that people don't really want this, and the content that we do have is really out of date. So it's kind of like a lose-lose.
Yeah.
Agreed. So I noticed that Andrew has joined us. Andrew, is there? So we were talking about removing provider-specific and platform-specific content. Steve had sort of shadow puppeted you to say, but hosting mirrored content, possibly. Is there anything more that you want to say about that?
I mean, since I don't have a good solution for it now, I'm not going to fight it. So I'll just go with what you guys are talking about, and just linking out.
Okay. All right. That is the end of the agenda that we have for this week. Is there anything else? We've got some time left. Is there anything that anyone wants to discuss or add to the agenda? Joe.
Andrew, since you joined us, one thing I wanted to put into some thinking and background for you at some point. I know you were doing a bunch of analysis on the metrics of the contributor experience and how the flow of people utilizing those docs kind of evolved from an analytics point of view. I would love to see kind of results of that in some fashion. It doesn't have to be, next week or tomorrow or anything, but just don't want to miss out and lose on it.
Yeah, actually, I'm just starting that. It's not done yet. So I'll keep you in the loop, because we're first, kind of making an assessment of what our analytics are now and what it can tell us. And then next step will be to add some things like, for example, we were thinking about adding like a time-based and focus-based beacon. So, because oftentimes people will leave a page open for many hours or days, and in traditional analytics, that just is considered a bounce, like because the session will time out and that's it. But it won't tell us how they're actually using. But if we have like a beacon that will refresh, different time periods, and then when the page is on the focus is on the page, it's on the forefront, then we can better measure like if they're using our docs like long term and leaving it open in a tab. So like if we can add things like that, that might help us track some of these behaviors, and then we can figure out based on that, like then after that, I think we want to find a set of metrics that will infer the kind of behavior that we're looking for. Like, so it's like multi-step, but I'm in the process of writing up the plan, the proposal, and then I'll share it with you guys.
Very awesome. As a side note, he doesn't make it to this meeting, but Matt Farina from Helm has been doing a bunch of work related to documentation for Helm, and it's kind of its own separate thing. But he's also been, at least during the Helm Summit and so forth, discussing how do we track this, how do we get metrics on it, things like that. So anything that we have that we could share in that direction, I think might be just general goodness for the overall community.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, very cool. All right, anything else for discussion? All right, that's a SIG meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Thanks much. Later.
Ciao.